Yesterday, in a win for reproductive rights advocates, federal judges in Alabama, Ohio, and Texas blocked orders that use the coronavirus as a decoy to ban abortions in those states. Today, we're talking to Heidi Sieck, the co founder of Vote Pro Choice, about this insidious tactic and what we should be aware of as other states fight similar orders. Heidi Sieck is the co founder, chief empowerment officer of Vote Pro Choice, a national political engagement platform connecting pro choice voters with pro choice champions in critical elections. Heidi is an award winning civic entrepreneur, proud partner of the Women's March on Washington, and a member of the policy table responsible for writing the intersectional unity principles. Heidi, thanks for coming on the show today.
Thank you, Juliana, and thank you so much for talking about these really important issues.
Oh, well, yes. Can you give people, if they're not aware of what's going on, because there are so many news stories to follow right now, can you talk about what happened last week in Texas, and then just give us kind of a where we are right now?
So first of all, from a higher level perspective, I have basically two. I come at this work from two perspectives. One is I have been a long time reproductive health advocate. Since I was 17 years old, I've been working for feminist causes. My first job out of college was Planned Parenthood in Lincoln, Nebraska. This has always been a part of my life. But I also took a detour in the 2000s, and I was an emergency responder, a disaster responder for many years for the city of San Francisco.
I did not know that.
I was a chief logistics officer in the Emergency Operations Center to address a lot of major disasters and crises that at the city level. And we did actually do the H1N1 pandemic response and the vaccination response. So I come at this from multi perspectives. So you'll probably hear some of the disaster responder in me, but it could not be a more perfect match for somebody like me to be both a disaster and emergency responder and in reproductive health and reproductive freedom right now, because it is a unmitigated disaster when it comes to access to comprehensive reproductive health care. So what's happening right now is that there are states that are already hostile to reproductive freedom. So these are states that have been for decades trying to chip away access to birth control, healthcare for women, healthcare for trans people, abortion care access, decades, and trying every possible which way to prevent people from getting access to critical, essential healthcare to protect their bodies and make decisions for their families. Now, in this crisis, what happens is that governors in their emergency declarations are allowed to say what essential services are to stay open. So what some of these governors are doing, and more critically, let's see if I've got the most accurate list. You might have a better list than I do, but governors in Alabama, Ohio, Texas, Tennessee, Iowa, and Oklahoma all proactively said that abortion was not an essential service, and they imposed I can't even speak today, haven't had my coffee. They
I
imposed
just drink mine right in the stream.
I know.
It's
They
3 hours. I
imposed
can't go that
direct penalties that included a fine and jail time. So $1,000 fine and jail time. So, but you've got to juxtapose this with what are they actually doing to protect against the pandemic. These are also governors that weren't putting in required shelter in place. They weren't actually restricting people's movement so much. They were mostly suggesting there was no police enforcement for these shelter in place orders, but they're restricting people from accessing abortion. So
So
they're
it's obvious that they're just using it as
totally, they're not protecting people in their homes. They're not forcing people to stay in their homes. They're forcing people to stay pregnant. It's total insanity.
oy, oy, oy.
So what we're seeing is there's a couple of different really challenging um, impacts. So Planned Parenthood, the Center for Reproductive Rights, is suing all of these states and saying, you can't do that. We have to have access. We all know that reproductive health care is time sensitive.
Mhm.
Um, abortion access does have restrictions on it, even from Roe v. Wade. Like, it's like around 24 weeks or so that you can't really get access unless it's a really dire situation. And so it's time sensitive. And a lot of these bans are saying you can't have any access until mid-April. And that's a serious problem.
And who's to say they wouldn't just keep banning it at that point?
100%.
Mhm.
And additionally, yeah, as long as the pandemic goes, as long as our shelter in place orders go, it connects to that. But more importantly, is the confusion this creates. So, particularly in states that are limiting access, and we're talking about Ohio, Texas, Tennessee, Iowa, um, and Oklahoma, but there's also other states attempting: Kentucky, Mississippi, South Carolina, Louisiana, Nebraska. You've got these state elected officials that are kind of like, we don't think we're going to try to put abortion in essential services. People are so confused. They're confused about what's available to them.
Mhm.
And so that's what's really frightening. And then honestly, let's talk about what's at stake here.
Yeah.
So you've got a vulnerable situation. You've got high stress in a quarantine. We know from the stats in China, and even now our statistics at Crisis Text Line and the National Domestic Violence Hotline, anxiety in the home is going up, violence in the home is going up, and you want to be able to have critical, essential access to all aspects of healthcare, particularly reproductive health, because these are difficult economic times. Our bodies are vulnerable. Our health and well-being is vulnerable. The last thing you want to be doing um, is staying pregnant.
There's additional potential implications of these laws too, right? Given that we know that some women will choose to leave and go to another state, and perhaps that's quite far, and then they're going to have to sleep over at a hotel or what in their car or God knows what. Or some women will find other ways, unsafe, outside of the law ways to get an abortion. Can you talk about the potential implications of these laws?
Well, the implications of these laws are extensive because it's not even just women looking for abortion, it's also the all aspects of these essential healthcare services. Trans people getting access to hormone therapy, it's emergency contraceptive, it's birth control, it's everything that is super important for us to be able to take care of ourselves and exercise reproductive freedom now more than ever.
Mm.
So, not having access, not even understanding that you have access, not understanding that these are all essential healthcare services, is so confusing for folks that they're putting their entire well-being at risk. So I just want to give a shout out to the states. This is how you do it. In Washington, Colorado, Massachusetts, New Jersey, Minnesota, Oregon, Hawaii, Illinois, Maryland, and New York, when they were establishing their essential services, they explicitly said birth control and abortion are essential services and should not be limited.
Was
Because
that from Andrew Cuomo? Just wondering, because I know it's like Cuomo he wasn't our favorite, but all of a sudden he's looking pretty good.
well, he's realized that support for reproductive freedom is a winning issue, that 77% of Americans believe, or people in America believe, we should have access to these critical services. They're foundational in nature. Now, we're seeing that more than ever. This is so much bigger than abortion. It's so much bigger than that. This is about freedom and control and autonomy and economic justice and access to education and healthcare. This is why this is the silver lining of this, is that people are getting this is far broader than than a stigmatized issue over here named abortion.
We had some wins this week with federal judges in a few states blocking the orders. Can you talk about that and what's important to know in that area?
Well, it's a complex fight. So for example, in Texas, the federal judge blocked the order, but then it went to the circuit court and the circuit court turned it back over again. So now people in Texas they don't know if they have access or not. The clinics don't even know if they should stay open or not. And so this is the dance that's happening now, and particularly because we have to now be using our courts to protect us. So that's the complexity of it, is
I
that we
was just
have.
thrilled that there were some federal judges who weren't completely right wing.
Yes. Yeah,
Like,
that's right.
great.
Well, and also, let's be honest, like Roe v. Wade is still in place. While limited, it is still in place. So banning abortion through an essential emergency declaration is actually unconstitutional.
Mhm.
So the issue with the Fifth Circuit, that's the problem, is Trump has been allowed to appoint all of these federal judges. So our circuit courts, which is the next step of courts before the Supreme Court. So things roll around in federal court and then circuit court and then the Supreme Court. This Fifth Circuit court is packed with conservative judges. Actually, all the circuit courts are now packed with conservative judges. Thank you, Mitch McConnell. Why we need to vote. Well, we'll talk about that in a minute. That these courts are now supposed to be protecting us from these state legislatures and these state elected officials who are now doing this insidious limitation. They're not, we can't trust that. And also, I don't know, I actually, honestly, this is something I don't know. If courts have the ability to do hearings and en banc decisions remotely. We know that most state legislature, I think most decision-making bodies in this country require you to be physically present
Mhm.
in order to vote. And so like that's an issue that we're going to have to address, but that's another deviation.
Well,
Yeah,
that
but
could work in our favor if they all have to get together and they're not
yeah,
allowed to. Well,
yeah.
let's raise it
And
where
so
it's at.
exactly. So Planned Parenthood, Center for Reproductive Rights, ACLU, they're all just suing. They're just suing against all of these things. But here's the thing is, here, this is what we got to realize. These are state elected officials. They are attorney generals and secretaries of state and governors, state legislatures that are allowing this crap to happen. And so now more than ever, November and our primaries have never been more important. We have got to get these people out. We just have to. And everyone knows this.
Yeah, and we do. And Vote Pro Choice is a great place to, to find out which candidates are going to be pro choice. That's are really strong
Who are
pro
going
choice.
to sell you out in a global pandemic. Literally, who are not going to force you to stay pregnant in a global pandemic.
What do you make of the fact that Pennsylvania, such a purpley and possibly red state, has not, has not capitulated to these same forces? It's too close to New York and New Jersey to do
Well,
that, or
it's you know, this is actually, I'm going to answer that with a much more high level systemic response. Um,
please do. We love
and
that
this
kind of
is this is what it's what you and I have talked about a lot in our conversations, which is this is a 30-year investment of infrastructure by the anti-choice minority. And like roll back to the 80s, um, Reagan and the conservative movement knew that they had to keep the ultra conservatives close to the Republican Party. So they made an investment, a long term systemic infrastructure investment into making sure the anti choice people that were anti choice, who's really like only about say 18% ish of the electorate, even with some wiggle room, maybe 8% that are super duper anti-choice, that are out there protesting now, still protesting. And I don't know if you've heard these insidious, horrible stories of protesters like coughing on people going into clinics.
yes.
It's just the worst. So,
Can you
and
tell the people in case they haven't heard it?
oh yeah. So the anti-choice movement is still telling people to go out and protest outside of clinics, ignoring the shelter in place
Are they
requirement.
staying 6 feet apart from each other, or are they?
No,
I
are not doing that. And then there were reports of these protesters coughing on people that were going in to get services at these clinics, and that's just it's unconscionable.
yes.
But again, the systemic truth is that we're talking about a small number of
It's
people, a
funny how
very
they can humanize a zygote, but dehumanize a walking human being. I don't understand that at all. Anyway,
yeah.
okay.
And this is just a small number of people. And so in the 80s, 30 years ago, the conservative movement knew that they had to keep that group of people connected to the Republican Party in order to win elections. Trump knows this too. And that's what we're dealing with is over the past 30 years, there's been enormous investment in mobilizing people, electing people at every single level. A minority of um, the politicians who actually reflect a minority of beliefs have been invested in at every level: school boards, state legislatures, city councils, governors, all of that. Unlike we have not done that. So this small minority of people that don't reflect the values of our country are have been elected for the last 30 years. So
Oh,
in Pennsylvania, you've got like it's in a state like Pennsylvania, you've got a real mix going on of like folks that are anti-choice, have been invested in by the movement, may have been elected, but you've also got Pennsylvania, which is a very purpley state, very into freedom, and very the women in Pennsylvania are certainly super pro-choice. If you run on reproductive freedom there, you can win. Ask Connor Lamb. And it's just like a misnomer that an anti-choice perspective is necessary. It's just not.
mm.
And so you're going to see that play out across the country. A lot of these governors are they're in place because of this investment, long-term investment, leadership investment. And now that's what we have to do on our side.
What should our viewers do who are worried about, their about reproductive rights during this moment? What is happening in the activist sphere?
Oh, so much. So I'm normally we're supposed to only just give one call to action just to make sure everybody does it. But I do have
Well, we're all at home with a lot of spare time now,
right.
so
So I do
we can
have
do more than one thing.
a couple of resources for people that I
Okay.
want to make sure that you all know exist. So one, this is essential service not elected. So if you're bored, call your governor. Just call your governor, call your state legislature, and tell them essential not elected. Do it any state you live in. It's cool. We really, particularly if you live in Alabama, Ohio, Texas, Tennessee, Iowa, Oklahoma, Kentucky, Mississippi, South Carolina, Louisiana, or Nebraska, definitely call. But if you're anywhere else, call. It's always good to make your voice known.
And when we call, we're saying that we want to make sure that abortion and women's health care are
It's
considered essential services.
It's not just women's healthcare. This is reproductive healthcare. This is
Right.
also including hormone therapy for trans people, and it's all aspects.
Okay, good. I wanted to make sure we have the proper wording for
Yeah,
people.
you want emergency contraceptive. You want these governors to be including reproductive healthcare access, including abortion, in all essential services documents, all of them. So that's what you want. Now, if you are struggling with access to reproductive freedom, um, I'm going to give you 3 potential resources.
Okay.
One, when you go to the pharmacy, you stock up on emergency contraception. It's over the counter in most states. Go to your pharmacist and just get some. If you believe that you are in a situation where you might need it, get it. It's really
I did not know it was over the counter, but you had to go to the pharmacist.
You have to go to the pharmacist. I think in some states they're now allowing direct over the counter, but that's new.
It's like this. It's like next to the Sudafed. So,
Yeah, that's exactly right.
okay.
Exactly right. Someday, hopefully, that will. I do believe, like in some states, that is changing. But stock up. Just do it. I mean, seriously, if you believe you're in that kind of situation. On that note,
That's
if
a really good idea, Heidi.
seriously,
I'm starting to picture myself wearing my mask out to my,
because
yeah.
going and getting an IUD right now, like, is a challenge. I wouldn't, you can do it at Planned Parenthood now if you can, but like, it's just, we all need to stay home.
Yeah.
Um, so when you're going and getting your, like, trying to see if there's toilet paper, which there is none in the entire island of Manhattan, I checked. Um, and just go and like stop and get some Plan B at your pharmacist.
And then
So
you can wipe with the box.
now, now, real talk though,
Sorry. Go
if
ahead.
no, it's all good. It's
No.
all, um, I want to be very mindful that we're all stuck in our homes and there's a lot going on in our homes. And we know this from what's happened in other countries, and we know it from our from reports. So if you're finding an increase of emotional stress, domestic violence, sexual abuse, child abuse, please call either the National Domestic Violence Hotline at 1-800-799-SAFE, or
Mhm.
you can text crisis text line, which is the amazing service. All you do is text home to 741-741. That's home to 741-741.
I'm writing it in
Yeah,
to the Twitch chat.
crisis text line, home 741-741. Now, for all the men out there, we need your help too. So both to take care of yourself. So there's a really cool like men's circles going on at the Good Men Project.
Mm.
So a really good place to like hang out and just talk about what's going on. And also Men for Choice is actively organizing for male allies to support reproductive freedom. So
Mm.
check out the Good Men
Yes, we
Project
had them on for a
and
little.
Men for Choice. Yeah.
That's
And then
wonderful.
finally, if you find yourself pregnant and seeking an abortion services, Planned Parenthood is still open. You can also call the National Abortion Funds. But if you live there is a service called Teleabortion, which provides telemedicine abortion services in 13 states. That's Hawaii, Washington, Oregon, New Mexico, Colorado, Georgia, New York, Maine, Iowa, Minnesota, Illinois, Maryland, and Montana. You have access to online abortion services.
Meaning,
Telemedicine, meaning the abortion pills will be sent to you and you
send
can
it to
talk
your
to a
mail.
doctor over telemedicine.
Oh boy.
So that's where
Oh,
we're at.
yes.
That's where we're at. But bottom line, sign up to vote pro-choice at voteprochoice.us. Know when your election is, and let's get these people, these anti-choice controlling people out.
Heidi, I'm to pivot briefly because both women's reproductive health care is uh, what you're working for, but you also work through electoral politics.
Yeah.
Well, we're in quite a moment now, aren't we? In terms of just any number of things that are being discussed, including will the Democratic convention happen? Where are we with our candidates? How is Joe Biden on reproductive health care? And then down the ballot, do we
Uh-huh.
have reproductive champions running?
Oh yeah, we've got tons, thank God. Um, okay, so I know that the DNC hasn't made a decision about whether they're going to have the convention or not, but I'm certain it will be massively limited. It's in July, so they're still in talk. They're still discussing it, and they haven't made a call. So to be determined. I really do think it's going to matter. It's obviously going to matter where we're at with the pandemic. I mean, New York is going to probably peak sometime in later April. So then the other hot spots will be happening across the country. And we don't even know what's going to go on in Milwaukee. So we'll see. You know, um, Joe Biden has evolved on reproductive freedom. He's never been what I would consider like, I wouldn't ever put him up as a pro choice champion. You know, he used to say the thing that drives me crazy, which I'm personally pro life, but, you know, Roe v. Wade is the law of the land. That is just like the most very basic. Roe v. Wade is the floor, not the ceiling. But he's certainly evolved over time, and I feel confident that he will continue to protect our access to reproductive freedom. And if he follows through with a vice presidential pick that is hopefully a pro-choice champion woman, then I will feel more confident that we're at least protected. I mean, bottom line, we got to get rid of Trump. I don't care, you know, like
Yeah, anyone but Trump. I'm an anyone but Trump.
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, Biden, the thing I do appreciate about Biden is that he does listen and he will evolve, and he does listen to women's groups and women's organizations. And he's got solid people around him who are going to make sure that the administration moves in the right direction.
And what do we do in terms of Biden's stance on the Hyde Amendment? Question from
Oh,
changed.
well, he changed. I mean, he changed his perspective. He used to go along with the political wave and be like the Hyde. Okay, so for all your listeners out there, the Hyde Amendment is
Now you're staying all day because you have to.
I'm not gonna have all my dates right. I'm one of those people that I love studying history and understanding how things fit together, but I always forget dates.
It's
So
I feel like dates are unnecessary.
yeah,
It's the context that's important.
yeah. So I know it's like, ugh. So I wish I was better at dates, but the Hyde Amendment was sort of a sellout to in established by Congress that said absolutely no federal funds could be used for abortion services. And so that is why a lot of the anti-choice screaming and yelling about I don't want to be paying for abortion, it's like you never do. Like the federal funds don't apply for abortion. But what does that mean? It means that if you are in the armed services and you need abortion services, you are paying for it yourself. Where it's the number one place to get a sexually assaulted, if
Mm.
you're well, any gender really, is the military. So come on now, right? So the Hyde Amendment has always been a bugaboo, and it actually was the last thing on the um, on the negotiation table to get the ACA passed, the Affordable Care Act passed, if you recall. It was called the Stupak-Pitts Amendment
Mhm.
that was reiterating the Hyde Amendment and that no federal funds would go to abortion services. It's always been this thing to sort of keep the anti-choicers in line. So they're still there. They're still there in Congress. Obviously, they're absolutely like the biggest virus in the Senate. So the Hyde Amendment has always been a thing that politicians have sort of let slide to get shit done. And Biden was part of that practical political team. Nancy Pelosi supported that too. She allowed that to happen. That's one of the reasons why I got reignited into reproductive freedom and feminist politics, because at the time, I was president of the San Francisco Women's Political Committee when the ACA was being passed. And Nancy Pelosi is one of the most pro choice um, champions, practical, um, progressive humans that you would ever want in elected office. She was trying to get the ACA passed, and she knew that she had to do it on the backs of access. And so now we can't ever let that happen. And I'm so appreciated that over the course of the last 10 years, the reality of fact of that we are a pro-choice nation. 77% of Americans believe we should have reproductive freedom. That's Republicans, Democrats, independents, that Joe Biden got the memo. Nancy Pelosi definitely got the memo. And now the Hyde Amendment is a thing we want to overturn. So it was a huge thing for it to be in the platform of the Democratic Party 4 years ago, and that's why I'm like confident we're getting our Democratic leaders on the right place. I mean, for God's sakes, we got rid of Dan Lipinski in Congress, in Chicago, and he was this awful anti-choice, anti-gay, like, ugh,
Democrat.
yeah, Democrat.
So
And Maureen,
I was just having an argument in the chat about how someone said blue no matter who is nonsense. Rational people are not going to vote for worse than Trump. It's ridiculous, and then went on and on about how it's ridiculous to behave as if Trump is the greatest evil we could ever know. Sometimes, I think people who are Democrats, or they hold the Democratic banner or they wear the Democratic name, but then they're just all in line with theocracy and Republican talking points or Republican Party platforms. Those are the worst because people go
yeah,
and maybe they're not following, they just vote for the Democrat and they get that guy who is not a Democrat at all when it comes to many things.
yeah, that's right. But you know what? This is the reality of it. 30 years of investment of the anti-choice infrastructure has turned a lot of have made the Democratic politicians believe that they can sell out reproductive freedom in order to win. So a lot of folks, like, Joe Biden was supportive of the Hyde Amendment, then he wasn't, because he believed that he had to be in order to win. We've seen that across the board. There was a congresswoman, I think it was Marcy Kaptur in Ohio, was a Democrat, super anti-choice. but not really in her heart. She was anti-choice because she believed she had to be in order to win. And then the reality set in when people started to realize what the hell is going on. And that's the great thing about it is most of this is because people didn't really understand what was going on. Marcy Kaptur now is a pro-choice champion. You know, she was anti-choice Democrat for a long ass time, and now she is not. And
Well,
so now we've got Joe Biden doing the same thing because they were using it they were monitoring their electorate and trying to stay elected. And the reality is now what we have to remind them is that if you want to stay elected, you can't be anti-choice
mhm,
and
mhm.
call
Well,
yourself.
I think that's wonderful because I do think people just, yeah, exactly what you said. I don't have to
These
repeat it.
people are,
The
I mean,
idea that they're afraid to run and say I'm pro-choice because then they're going to lose their base in certain, certain areas. And now with groups, especially like the one that you have co-founded with Vote Pro-Choice, every time we've talked, you give the figure that is so shocking when you hear it at first, but is the reality of our nation. What's the percentage that is pro-choice?
well, bottom line, we know for certain 7 in 10 American voters believe there should be access to abortion that is safe, legal, affordable, accessible, and without shame. That is
7 in 10.
7 in 10. But you can get up to 82% believe that Roe v. Wade should not be overturned. Like there is everybody's got their own like perspectives on time frame and access and a lot of different stigmas, and I understand that we're swimming in a sea of misogyny and sexism, and that's just where we're at. I mean, that's just true. And so I understand like people bring to the idea of reproductive freedom sexuality, sex, abortion, all kinds of stuff, but they know, all of us know in our own lives the choices that we've had to make because of reproductive freedom. 1 in 4 people or women have terminated a pregnancy, and 2/3 of those are already mothers. Those are economic decisions, those are personal decisions, and so we all have an experience of trying to exercise our reproductive freedom. So we're at like 80% as a pro-choice nation. And the kicker is that the infrastructure, the investment in the anti-choice infrastructure has been so effective in their propaganda and their scary protest and all those terrible fetus pictures and their bullying in front of clinics that we believe that their power is greater than it is. It's
Exactly. I'm
just
so
not.
happy to hear this.
Yeah.
I'm so happy to hear what
That is my mission in life is like everybody, men, women, non-binary, trans, this is your thing. This is your fight. This is your game. It's about freedom.
I think this
Let's
is
take back
wonderful.
how
And
we
I'm so
control.
happy to hear about Marcy Kaptur and some of these other, the fact that we have, as you said, a bench of people who are not
Yeah.
just hedging on being pro-choice, but who are proudly pro-choice,
Oh,
and that
it's
you
great.
believe that Joe Biden would be, movable, even if he's not, the most.
Practical dude. He's a practical dude. He knows the game, you know, like he does.
I just love hearing that the game is now he's going to have to move left.
Yeah.
That's the game. I like that part of the game now.
That is
That's good.
absolutely the game. It is absolutely the game. And you know, the last thing I'll say about like politics is that my thing is the Democratic Party has a platform, and it has a platform on reproductive freedom and access and healthcare that is comprehensive and truly great. It is progressive, it includes sexuality education, it includes all kinds of access for the health and well-being of our families, understanding that it's a foundational issue. If you call yourself a Democrat, have you not read the platform? I mean, that's how I come at it. All of the candidates, and we endorse candidates, we particularly focus on down ballot pro choice candidates. We currently have about 60 that we're coaching and supporting, and we hope to get up to about 200. And we're talking about city councils. We even did a Texas railroad commissioner. Um, we helped a woman running in the primary for the Texas Railroad Commissioner as a pro-choice champion. So, you know, these are Democrats that really, we make them read the platform and say, do you at least believe this? Because it's good.
Mhm.
So we have a mission to get rid of these anti-choice Democrats because there's just no need for it.
Heidi, the media coverage of what's happening in these states around the coronavirus and how these federal judges are blocking, are trying to use the coronavirus as a reason to limit access. Have you seen any? Has MSNBC called to have you on? Have you seen decent coverage of this? It's such an important issue.
No, it's not great. I'm mostly been doing, I did some local press in Texas, and then I've been doing a lot of feminist press. So we did InStyle and Ms. Magazine and stuff like that. Planned
And Act
Parenthood,
TV, yay.
yeah, of course, of course. I love Act TV. You have such an important. You are. I just am so appreciative of the audience of Act TV. You are the critical activists and the people who are going to hold these elected officials accountable. But I do want all you listeners to know that this is your issue too. This is not a feminist women's issue. This is about your well-being, the well-being of your families. It's about economic access, economic justice. Like, come on in, like this is not like a pink parade. This is everybody.
It's a pink
uh,
and blue.
Seriously. And so, like, Planned Parenthood has been doing quite a bit of their PR because they're doing most of the lawsuits, but we need more. I mean, we need more coverage. And this is the kicker. um when people find out what's going on in their local communities, when they really, really understand it. This is research that we've done over time about activating voters on this issue. When folks in there understand what's happened in their communities, they get so pissed off and they get ignited into action.
Mhm.
So covering these issues are critically important. And so I unfortunately I've had to rattle off a bunch of states, but if you live in those states, I hope you heard
No,
yourself.
it's important. Yeah. No, no.
Um, but that's why, like, this is an important conversation because I would assume you're pissed
Yeah.
that
They're
these,
pissed.
these anti-choice politicians are using a global pandemic to not protect you, to force you to stay in your homes, but to force you to stay pregnant.
Mhm,
That is total dystopian insanity.
mhm. Yeah,
So
it's a rise of
we
authoritarianism.
are here, my friends. We are here, and there's no reason for it, and we're going to fix it in November.
Heidi Sieck, co-founder and chief empowerment officer of Vote Pro-Choice, the national political engagement platform connecting pro-choice voters with pro-choice champions in critical elections. You can follow her at
ProChoice.us. Yeah.
oh,
And Heidi Speaks.
I was gonna, yeah, you specifically at Heidi Speaks
Yeah.
and Vote Pro-Choice at US. Thank you so much for being on with us, and we'll keep checking in because I don't think this issue's going away anytime soon.
And we should really talk about, we'll have to do some discussions about like voter suppression and confusion because they're using these options, these pandemics to really make us confused and make sure we don't get to the polls when we need to get to. But
Absolutely. I mean, they're changing the days, and then there's the whole argument about, this person is terrible because they kept their election going.
we will not be confused. We
No,
are not going to be confused. Our job is to make sure you are not confused.
I
So
don't understand how I can do the news from home and CNN anchors can do the news from home, but we can't vote from home. That seems how I have a mailbox. Can we, anyone? Okay, more on this later. Thank you so
yeah,
much, Heidi. I appreciate it.
thank you, Act TV audience. Sign up. Remember, voteprochoice.us and crisis text line home to 741-741 if you need it. We're here
Thank
for
you
you.
so much. Thanks,
Thank you.
Heidi. Appreciate it.
Bye.